COVID comes through, and you just mentioned, actually it was mentioned to me earlier on that the challenge happened even amidst COVID. Did it affect your input and the way you do things? Were there any advantages or disadvantages? Did we see anything get better, or everything was affected to the worst?
Thank you. So for me, first and foremost, for me, I think that COVID was bad. I can't say bad. Like,
especially for you, right?
I think for everyone, because I think the opportunities we see coming out of the pandemic, like, you know, the world going online, could have happened probably at a slower pace. But I wouldn't say, you know, do the comparison of was probably on the other side. For MCI, we had to transition pretty much quickly to make sure that all our sessions, our trainings are going online with the journalism students. The bigger challenge was most of our students that we deal with are, by then are home. They don't have access to internet. Some of them are in communities that our internet penetration is really poor. So we saw that we still were able to reach out to most of Zoom sessions. Sometimes you'd have like 10 people or less, but we managed.
So initially, before you'd have numbers as big as this?
No, we have activities of like 300 people.
On Zoom?
No, physically, like physical face-to-face. But when it gets to Zoom,
it's like 10 people.
You have 50, 100 sometimes.
You can keep increasing. You said 10 in the first place.
But 10 would be the smaller trainings.
Okay,
Yes.
Continue.
Yeah.
But then, did this push you to be more innovative beyond just Zoom? Because everyone gave their comfort. They took their comfort to Zoom. It's like there's this particular platform. Okay, this is where we can work from. There was no other way of doing this.
For trainings, really, it had to be Zoom for everyone. For our program, we had other ideas. So I think for Fat Boy, I think your radio is in August. But by, I think, March 2020, we had started an online radio. Also started by that gentleman over there. Please wave, right? Yeah, started by Ali, is one of the fellows from the program.
Good to meet you.
So Ali started our online radio, MCI radio. It's also, it's an app, so you can download and listen. And what we did with that is most of the students that now were not in the universities were home and doing community stories.
So they were studying online, on the online radio.
Yeah, using their phones and sending us the content.
Yeah, don't raise your voice that loud. You're sitting next to competition.
Okay. No, we're not competing.
Yeah, because you're broadcasting from where? He's online, he's trying to garner audience, and you're also online trying to garner audience.
We are training people for
him.
It's not a competition.
Man. But that is amazing. If you did that, that means most of your students were taking classes online.
No, for the radio, it's produce content from your community and send it to us. We run it on the MCI radio. For the trainings, we also recently came up with the MCI Connect, which is, I would say, our community app. So you can access mentorship, you can access all our trainings. So when I talk about my team being able to think quickly on their feet to design online courses that can be accessed on the web platform, but also on mobile platforms, that's between 2020 and now, we have a whole platform online that can be accessed by a journalism student or anyone from anywhere they are.
When we get out of COVID come January, is it still going to be relevant?
Of course. It's going to be relevant because now more than ever, people know the relevance of, especially journalism students that we work with. They can still access our trainings online. It is even, I think, going to be a very a big advantage for us because we can go to them physically and then we can show them how to use the platform and access it at night, in the morning, anytime they want.
At night?
Yes.
Be affecting people's
They
night
could be.
activity.
They could be in a club somewhere in a bar and still go on the MCI Connect app and study one module.
Of all places, you talk about the bar. You're the people that are
young people.
They're the people who are making us
people
not
have
go.
to enjoy.
Hey, okay. That's interesting. As we move to you, Miss Anika, there's been lots of activities that you've been engaged with, especially with journalists and all the services that you've been offering over time. COVID-19 formed you under so many activities. You are active. What was at the forefront by the time COVID came through?
Yeah, thank you. I can start with just what InfoNile is, maybe.
InfoNile, that's okay.
Yeah, so we are a geo-journalism platform in the Nile Basin, which includes 11 countries in the Nile. And we have been trying to promote cross-border and collaborative data journalism on environmental issues in the Nile. But our model has always been online and offline. So we have our online platform, and we publish cross-border online stories. But at the same time, we support journalists to report in their media houses, whether they're radio, TV, newspapers. So they publish stories within their own media landscape, and then we also publish them. So I think COVID was a big blow to a lot of the traditional media that we work with in terms of even just their salaries. A lot of people were laid off. So we give them facilitation to do in-depth stories. And you also find that these are not stories which at the beginning of the pandemic were really prioritized. So we were looking at biodiversity in lakes, like when COVID hit. And I remember we were asking ourselves, are these stories even relevant now, or should we maybe wait a few months? Because the only thing people are talking about now is COVID. And yet you realize that most of the issues like climate change, water and sanitation, biodiversity, they were actually impacted by COVID. COVID impacted almost everything in the world. So they were still relevant, and we were trying to find space for them in the media houses. But I think, like, if you were going to ask me how the opportunities that came from COVID, we support journalists in 11 countries. And before COVID, most of the time journalists, we would have a training maybe in one country. It was hard to promote those international collaborations, but COVID opened up a huge opportunity for online collaborations. So we were able to do various trainings, engaging with journalists in different countries on the same theme, like journalists from all of East Africa looking at wildlife conservation. And they're able to see the linkages between the countries, which is so important when you look at an issue like wildlife trafficking, which is cross-border. And we were able to start a mentorship program, a data journalism mentorship program, where journalists would meet in small groups, all reporting about a same topic, but in different countries. So they were able even to exchange sources and information. We had several webinars with scientists sharing data and information about water, environment, climate change. And some of the journalists who attended the webinars actually got story ideas from another country and were able to report and link it to their country. So I think there's a lot of room for international collaborations, cross-border reporting that was opened up due to, everyone was online and we were following what was happening in all the different countries. So many webinars connecting us. So I think that was something that's positive that came out.
The activities that you would carry out with the journalists, at a point before COVID, were you operating the same on any digital platform, or more so, were you sharing any information like maybe on an app or something of the sort? Did you have anything like that, or you created it after?
Yeah, before we just had our website, but I would say it wasn't really the focus of the content. We were supporting the journalists where they were actually reporting in their media houses. But even after COVID, even the radio journalists, now they would share with us the link to their story. And before they would say, no, it was just run on our radio station, we don't have a link. So you kind of saw that online transition. But also for us, we put a huge new focus on promoting the online content in different ways. whether through, that's when we started a newsletter. Now we are working on WhatsApp newsletters and WhatsApp magazines, specifically how to translate data into something which is really interesting and understandable by people using their phones. Because we know that a lot of data journalism is hard to consume, especially very long, in-depth stories. So I think like the online transition has provided new opportunities to translate data and to find ways to make it interesting and kind of in bite-sized pieces to different audiences, especially using phones.
Thank you. As I mentioned that I'll get back to you, Fat Boy, about practicing professional journalism and more so making sure that we put in perspective that we are trying to find a way forward on how everything is going to be working. So in this regard, media viability and more so journalism and putting it to another level, is it going to still come through? Is it still going to come through professionally with online?
Well, we are subject to the same rules and standards that are issued by Uganda Communications Commission. Actually have a license to operate. Over the last year or so, I think UCC expanded their scope of jurisdiction to also cover online activity. I think there was some controversy, some excitement generated by some UCC statements pertaining to bloggers and social media and influencers and how some of them might require registration or to pay some fees, or I think some guidelines were given on how they would be regulated. And, you know, people got nervous because we were kind of used to the internet being the Wild West here in Uganda, but we're seeing UCC extending its tentacles into the online space. But, you know, I'm very happy to comply with the regulations because, you know, I'm not doing anything that would cause much concern. I mean, you know, in terms of what kind of speech will be featuring on my radio station. I'm not going to slander or, you know, defame anybody. I'm not going to incite any violent actions or threaten, or it's just, you know, nice feel-good radio for everyone to tune into and relax and get information. So we're very happy to comply. And, you know, I'm not such a huge fan of too much regulation, but, you know, a little guidance may not be a bad thing. And at least for online content creators, the hurdles actually are not as big as they would be for the terrestrial content creators. I think if you want to start a television station or an FM radio station, I mean, first of all, the costs of the licenses are much higher. And also, I think, you know, even when you want to import your machinery, it has to go, there's a lot of, you know, security people, police have to be informed of any transmission equipment you're importing. It's quite cumbersome. But yeah, for online content creators, it's not that difficult, and thus far, at least we are happy to comply.
I have a feeling, I do believe, like I mentioned, when you weren't here, I believe so, majority of the members here are professional journalists. I have a feeling, like you mentioned, it's a feel-good radio, that there's going to be a little bit of laxity when it comes to practicing professional journalism. And yet we are trying to see how all the innovations and technology innovations in particular that have come in place can still be able to carry the weight of what professional journalism has done over the years. Isn't this going to go down a little bit?
There is a risk of that happening because the online economy is slightly worse than traditional legacy media, in the sense that we are desperate and hungry for clicks if you are a publication, and for audiences if you're a radio or a television or like a video creator. And this sort of pushes people to sensationalize, to come out with information before all the facts are in. You know, you want to be, there's a famous Denzel Washington clip where he's being interviewed, and you know, he says, you know, the problem with the media is you want to be the first one that's out with the story, and you want to push it and you want to sell it. It's not important that it is true. It matters that you are the first to say it, because then everyone flocks to you. And obviously that creates room for fake news. It creates room for information that could potentially incite. You've seen pictures going viral of purported victims of violence, maybe by police, and then it turns out the picture is from a different country, but it already went viral. Just last week, there was a picture of a woman whose face that had been deformed by the recent bombs, and it turns out she wasn't from this country. And so there's not much of a filter that would allow for information to be vetted before it goes out. And so when some people say, yeah, maybe we need a mechanism to oversee how online media operates, I can see why they would say that, and probably there's a good reason as to why we need something like that. But also, media is also open to being compromised. Because all of them are businesses, or most of them, it means they're susceptible to singing the tune of whoever is paying them. And this is not only true of online media, but even legacy media, where when you have industries that support the media, like let's say, say the telecoms, who spend billions annually on advertising. Not too many journalists are going to feel bold enough to comment on something bad a telecom company is doing, or something bad a government institution is doing, or an international institution is doing, like UN, World Health Organization. Like, everyone's going to feel shy to be critical of these huge institutions, which, by the way, they deserve probably more scrutiny than even, because of the kind of power they amass. They need to be scrutinized. When they do good, they should be praised. When they do something shady, they should be called out. But with the incentives in place that make certain journalists reluctant to go all out to criticize certain entities, whether they be private corporations, businesses, or international institutions, it opens the door to narrative pushing by journalists. And then what happens? And then those who are beholden to the narrative then say everyone else who publishes contrary information is spreading misinformation or fake news. And then you see a push towards censorship. And this is the strangest thing. I have found it baffling. The biggest promoters of censorship online are actually journalists, if you can believe that.
They're seated right here.
Because they believe that some journalists have decided that they have the truth, that their gospel is the truth, and that anyone else, whether on YouTube or Twitter, on Facebook, that says something slightly different, they're deemed agents of misinformation, and they advocate for their censorship. This has never happened before. But again, this just speaks to the fact that journalists are also beholden to the interests that fund them. So what does that mean at the end of the day? For we in the online space, where there are opportunities for us to...
Next question that I'm actually going to be asking that same question, but I'm asking Paul that particular question. But on a yes or no, you are an innovator. When your innovation came through, did you get positive support from journalists?
Yes. My development was met with a lot of excitement. Also because you have to understand the circumstances in which my radio started. It was sort of like the story of a comeback, So some people felt that I was done wrong by my previous employers after all the years that I'd worked for them. And so when they saw me sort of attempting to make a comeback, I think there was this desire by a lot of people for it to succeed. Mm-hmm. And so I did get a lot of support, both from fans and also from members of the media fraternity. Of course, there were those who expressed skepticism, which I welcome. It's always good to, to always look at all sides of a situation. And some said, yeah, is it viable? I don't see it lasting a few months or a year even. And all that is good. But overall, I would say the feedback was positive.
Thank you. Paul, you are an innovator, an entrepreneur, I'd like to say, and you've put a few projects that I know about personally.
And a former journalist.
And yes, a former journalist. Oh yeah, so you know exactly what happens when you put something in place and you need media attention. All the projects that you put together, and more so all the innovation that we see around, all the projects that people are doing, either technological or whatever. Do you think the media and journalists embrace it the way they embrace other things that are political or other things that are, put it in any circle that you want? I don't know what your comments are on that.
Right, thank you so much. I believe, I actually think the media is doing quite well on supporting innovation. But I want us to look at the bigger picture, not just supporting. The bigger picture is impact. You or we, the media, we shape policy, we shape infrastructure, we shape almost each and every thing that affects the way we live, the way we interact with people, the way we do each and everything on a daily basis. So while we need the media to support innovation, but the big question is the innovation that we are trying to push impactful? And if it is, how is it impacting society? So many times I've interacted with a number of innovators who would instead try to innovate a solution without digging deep and understanding the problem, which is a problem in its problem. So I think while we want the media to support us, we should be mindful of the solutions that we are bringing. Are they real solutions? And if they are going to solve any problem, who is going to benefit from those solutions?
As innovators, do you give out enough information to the media?
Oh yeah, the best thing that will ever happen to any innovator is to have an interview from a media personality. One of the biggest people that I admire most is a founder of Salesforce. He's called Mark Benioff. He says he's one of the biggest innovators of our time, but he says his best friends are journalists. And the reason as to why he is, it's because they've pushed him where he is. Like where he couldn't go, the media took him there. And the media is taking us places. But again, it's going to come back to what impact are we doing? She talked about data. Africa is poised to have 1.8 billion people. To some people, it's just 1.8 billion people. But to people who are thinking innovation, that is supposed to be the youngest marketplace world over.
Thank you very much, Paul. As I'll be coming back to you, Anika, to get some remarks, could be final. And Mr. Abbas, I have the floor open, ladies and gentlemen. If you do have any questions, I'll be grateful to work with you so that we can, in one way or the other, as we try to do a wrap, get to understand clearly how this works with technology and innovation. There's one thing that I actually used to understand with the previous generations, because I'm not from this generation. The previous generation never really liked technology a lot. Most people actually used to think a fat boy is a gadgetry person. Is that right? Like a gadget person, like a technology. No, is that so?
Not really. I might have some curiosity about tech, but I'm not like huge.
You're just curious. No, serious. Everyone thinks like you are like gadget. In your days, which days were those? He had a Walkman.
Those are just small, tiny things.
In our generation, they were not tiny.
Oh, okay.
Even in our generation, after your generation, they were not tiny. but what I mean with that, then comes technology in this day and age that young people are very obsessed with. I don't know, I think it was Dr. Emily in the morning, she mentioned that her children know how to use her phone better than her, which is actually correct. Sometimes my children do that to me, where I don't know something, and they just say, hey, daddy, and they just swipe and they move away and not thinking, why is this old man not, working out with certain things. But are we going to remain like that? Are we going to remain with technology all the way? Is it going to rule everything? I think Dr. Emily again mentioned that we embrace everything and we put it online, and we forget about the biggest population that has no idea what a website is. And then we are to an extent of just putting the information on social media.
Well, there's some people who believe in what they might call a full circle theory. Like, if you look at the trajectory of civilization and where we have reached and how obsessed we are with technology, it's creating certain unforeseen social consequences that might actually make it difficult for civilizations to thrive. Now, because information can be shared so quickly, there appears to be more strife, more division among communities, more potential for incitement of hatred. Terrorists are coordinating their activities. Meanwhile, the more advanced we get, the more we focus on education. People are having fewer and fewer children. So in developed countries, you have most countries with replacement birth rate below replacement. And so for all the technological advances we might celebrate, it's all sort of pushing humanity in a direction where it may be unable to sustain itself. And so it might all come crashing down. No one sits and asks themselves, why have previous civilizations collapsed? Whether you look at ancient Greece, ancient Rome, or Egypt, or things like this, where these people were building structures which to this day, modern engineering cannot understand how these structures were built. And yet, these civilizations left no trace of how they developed these ideas. Is there a possibility that the same might happen to our society, to our generation, where down the road, even though we embrace all of these things and we harness it to make ourselves more productive, at the same time, it's creating conditions that might make it difficult for us to sustain humanity? This push towards technology is also affecting the environment. The environment is being seriously degraded as we become more and more technologically advanced. More forests are being destroyed in order to meet the demand for the materials that are required for all of the gadgets we are using.
It's actually where I was going with Madame Anika on the same, how technology, while we are here celebrating technology, she's out there with her team trying to, make sure that the environment is preserved.
So we need that. I think we need, even though we celebrate the advances of technology, we need people like her to keep reminding us that we need to tend for the environment.
Now, if I may hear that from you, how is technology and environment, as you try as much as possible to put out information and help journalists that are reporting about this because we want to bring it in the limelight, how is this fight going? Because it's not an easy fight. I believe so. I don't know what you have to say about the same.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's not an easy fight for sure. I honestly don't know
I'll join you in the fight. We will win.
If we are winning or not. Sometimes if you're fighting for kind of environmental sustainability against climate change, it feels like you're fighting against this huge force which is unstoppable. And honestly, I'm not sure if it is or not, but what I know is that we need technology, but it's not everything in the fight. The most important thing I can say here is about collaborations in many different ways. I think as young people, we love technology. We love to feel like we are doing something new, which has never been done before. We've created this app and it's going to change the world. But I don't think that's true. I think it might be adding something. It's innovating something, but we have to look at what has worked in the past as well. What are the platforms that are reaching the most people? For example, here in Uganda, it's still radio is one of the most important platforms. And when you look at issues like the environment, you can't just talk to youth in the urban areas on WhatsApp. If you want change, environmental sustainability, this requires everyone, from the people in the villages, the forums, but we pool our resources and strengths and put out the message, even in different languages.
You know, earlier on I asked 2 questions to 2 innovators.